Hey, what's up? This is Tabena with Everything About Nothing. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to talk about my honest opinions between an NFL training camp and a college training camp. My pro athlete career didn't really last too long, but for the most part, I got to see some aspects of what was different from being in a college training camp since we're in it right now. In my short experience in the NFL, I just realized that the practices weren't as long. In college, the practices were so much drawn out, but the NFL is completely different. Everything had a purpose. There wasn't any wasted time. Practices were shorter and condensed, but we got a lot done. When we were in practice, you would see us going from drill to drill, station to station. It wasn't as elongated. We had our set amount of plays. There was no reruns unless we needed to, but for the most part, everything was done on the first play or was scrapped, and we kept moving. No wasted time. Time and efficiency were the thing, especially with the NFLPA only giving the NFL players only a certain amount of time that they could be practicing, and if they went over, they were fined. Next, I would say about the NFL training campus, they weren't as physical. Don't get it wrong. Practice was still very intense, but when I mean physical, we were in full pads taking each other out every single day. The only time I could say that we really got physical was when we had our joint practices, and I gotta have a joint practice with the Tampa Bay Bucks when I was with the Tennessee Titans. But for the most part, they weren't as physical. Everything was just about getting things done. It was the repetition. It was doing right. They said do it right, do it light, do it wrong, and you just keep moving along. That was what I noticed about the NFL. In college, it was a completely different ball game. But the NFL, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars. They've played pro football at the highest form for a very long time. They don't need to clang and bang every day in practice. They know how to take care of their body. Why? Because they said a prepared body is a ready body. Like I said, if the training camp was just more faster and intense. You were coming from college where you think you're playing at a high level, but get to the NFL where everybody's fast. Everybody's running a 4.3, 4.4 speed at every position that you can think of. The margin of error playing in the NFL is so small, so you have to keep going. You can't mess up on not knowing your plays, because if you play small one time, you're going to be looking crazy out there. It's different than in college. You can kind of mess up and kind of figure your way out, but the NFL, everything is being watched, everything's detailed, because everybody plays so much faster. So that's why you see it on TV. Everything kind of doesn't look as intense as in college, but I promise you, everybody's moving at game time speed. So now we're going to talk about my college experience training camp. College to me was a kind of different beast compared to the NFL. It still had its hard points, but not as the NFL or professionally football. In college, the practices were longer. We had double days. Those days were the longest days because you had a long, drawn-out practices, scout periods, team periods, double team periods. Everything was just about getting as many reps as you could. We would rerun plays so many times sometimes that we would go over. Why? Because we didn't technically have a regulation with how long they can keep us out. Yeah, they did, but it wasn't as enforced as it was when I played professionally. In college, you always had that first day of pads. Everybody knew that this was the day where it was done talking. Everybody had to just do the talking with the pads. And after the first 2 or 3 days, you're already beat out. But then you had to realize that you had to do it the next week and the next week and the next week. And there was more days that we had full pads on, that we had shells. So guys were just kind of getting burnt out by the end of training camp, and you saw a lot of injuries started piling up. And for me, we just had longer days. In the NFL, compared to us, college, we'd be in training camp from 6 a.m. to 9:30 to even 10 p.m. sometimes. It was a complete long days, and those days were just elongated with meetings, unnecessary practices, and just longer break times than we would have in NFL, where days are condensed. We'd be done by 2, 3 p.m. You go back home, watch film, and do a lot of things as pros do. But in college, you're not as professional yet, so the coaches don't want to give players too much ample time, so they keep them in those meetings for far longer, which sometimes gets long, drawn out, and it just feels like Groundhog's Day at that point. And then lastly, the pressure just wasn't there. As a pro, you're playing for your career. You're playing for your family. And as a college kid, I'm guaranteed to be there for 3-4 years, depending on where you are at the time. But for the most part, you didn't have the pressure of having to show up every day. Yeah, you wanted to play, but you knew that you had still time. In the NFL, it's a completely different beast. You're playing for 1 month to give yourself an opportunity to feed your family. I've seen grown men cry. Why? Because they were getting cut. It was a hard thing. But then in college, you're pretty much just trying to waiting for the school to start. You can finally stop practicing as much and finally get some time to hang out with your boys. It's just the pressure was different. The stakes weren't as high as they were in the NFL. So can you tell me, as anybody that was a college athlete, did I miss anything? And what are some things that you realized were different as a college if you had an opportunity to play pro? Drop a like, comment below.